He stole everything from me and disappeared. He thought I was just another heartbroken victim he could forget about. He didn't know I was about to team up with his other victims from around the world to hunt him down. There are ghosts that haunt old houses, their stories etched into the dust and the decaying floorboards. And then there are the new ghosts, the ones that haunt the cold blue light of the internet. The ghost that found me was handsome. He promised me the future, and he had the kindest, most intelligent eyes I had ever seen. The only thing he forgot to mention was that he wasn't real. Dear friends, your comments and support mean the world to us. Tell us, what challenges have you faced in life, or maybe you're facing right now? Like this video and right where you are watching us from, we will be happy to send you our regards. So stay with us. Don't miss what's coming next. My name is Clara, and at 54, I had come to believe that my life was a settled thing, a quiet, orderly, and deeply lonely thing. After my husband passed away 10 years ago, I had poured everything I had into my career as a high school administrator and into raising my daughter, who was now grown and living her own life on the other side of the country. My life was good. It was stable. I had my savings, my small but comfortable home, and my own quiet company, but the silence in my house had become a roar. So, on a Tuesday night, fueled by a glass of wine and a profound sense of loneliness, I did what millions of other lonely people do. I downloaded Tinder. I waded through a digital swamp of blurry photos, predictable bios, and men holding large fish. It was a disheartening landscape of forced smiles and tired cliches. I was about to delete the app, my brief experiment in modern hope a failure, when his profile appeared. His name was Julian. The first photo was not a selfie, but a professionally taken shot. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a dark suit, with a confident but not arrogant smile. But it was his eyes that stopped me. They were intelligent, kind, and seemed to hold a calm, steady certainty that I had not felt in years. He was handsome, yes, but more than that, he looked real, substantial. But it was his bio that truly set him apart. There were no quotes about living, laughing, loving. Instead, it was a short, sharp, and intelligent paragraph. Independent financial broker, believer in market cycles and human potential. I spend my days building futures for my clients and my nights looking for someone to build one with. I speak fluent sarcasm, but I'm better at honest, straightforward conversation. What is the most seductive language in the world? For a woman who had spent her life managing budgets, paying off a mortgage, and carefully building a small nest egg through sheer, grinding hard work, it was his. The language of success. The language of a world of investments and possibilities that had always felt closed off to me. I swiped right, my heart giving a hopeful little flutter I hadn't felt since I was a girl. A moment later, my phone buzzed. We had matched. His first message was not "hey" or a compliment on my looks. It was Clara, a beautiful classic name, head of administration at Northwood High, I see. A tough job, managing budgets, managing people. You must be the most organized and patient person in the city. He had read my profile. He had seen me, not just my picture, but my life, and he had understood it. The conversation that followed was effortless. He didn't just flatter me, he engaged me. He asked about the challenges of my job, about my daughter, about the books I was reading. And when I asked about his work, he spoke of markets and portfolios, not in a bragging way, but in the way a master craftsman speaks of his tools. He made it sound like an art form, a way of seeing the world that was both logical and full of potential. He was using a vocabulary I didn't know, but I found myself desperately wanting to become fluent. Words like arbitrage, futures, emerging markets, they sounded like a kind of poetry, a promise of a world where one was not simply surviving, but thriving. We agreed to meet for a drink that Friday. I was a nervous wreck, but the moment he stood up to greet me at the quiet, upscale wine bar, all my anxiety melted away. He was even more handsome in person, his smile just as warm, his eyes just as kind, and he knew how to listen. He put his phone away and gave me his complete, undivided attention. It was a gift so rare and so powerful, it was intoxicating. The date was perfect, too perfect. The conversation flowed. The wine was excellent, and he insisted on paying, gently brushing my hand aside when I reached for my purse. "Absolutely not," he said with a warm smile. "A man takes care of the woman he's with." As I drove home that night, a dangerous, beautiful, and utterly foolish thought began to take root in my heart. After a decade of loneliness, after years of telling myself that this quiet, solitary life was enough, I had finally gotten lucky. I had finally met the man who could help me build a new life, a better life, a life where I wouldn't have to do everything all by myself. I had no idea that this charming, perfect man was not a builder at all. He was a demolition expert, and my life was the building he was about to bring crashing to the ground. The first date was not a fluke. The second was a walk along Lake Michigan where he brought me a coffee, remembering exactly how I took it from our initial conversation. The third was a small independent jazz club he'd read about because I'd mentioned I loved live music. Each date was a perfectly crafted piece of a larger construction, and the structure he was building was my trust in him. A good con man doesn't just sell you a fantasy, he finds the fantasy you've already built inside your own heart and sells it back to you piece by piece. Julian was a master architect of my own quiet, unspoken dreams. He listened, truly listened, to my stories of years spent being the reliable one, the strong one, the one who always had to have the answers. And then he would reframe it. "You're not just organized, Clara," he'd say, his voice full of a gentle admiration. "You're a fortress." But even fortresses need a partner to help guard the walls. He made my exhaustion sound like strength. He made my loneliness sound like noble independence. And he made his presence in my life feel not like a romance, but like a long overdue reinforcement. To cement my trust, he offered a piece of himself, or rather a carefully fabricated piece. One evening over dinner, he told me a story about his past. It was a tale of a brilliant tech startup, a business partner who had betrayed him, and a devastating financial loss. He spoke of the shame of having to rebuild his life from scratch. Have you ever felt that perfect click of connection with someone, that soul-deep feeling that they just get you? As he told me about his past failures, his eyes holding a look of remembered pain, I felt a wave of profound empathy. I saw him not as a slick, untouchable broker, but as a fellow survivor. I didn't realize at the time that empathy is a key, and he was a master locksmith, using it to silently unlock the vault of my trust. He insisted on meeting my friends, a small, tight-knit circle of women I had known for decades. I was nervous, but I shouldn't have been. He was flawless. He remembered their names, asked about their jobs, charmed them with his self-deprecating humor, and insisted on paying the entire bill for dinner. The verdict was unanimous. "Clara, he is a keeper," my friend Sarah told me in the restroom. "He's smart, he's successful, and he's clearly crazy about you. Don't you dare mess this one up." And with that, my last line of defense, the cautious skepticism of my friends, was gone. Any lingering doubt I might have had now felt like my own foolish paranoia, a fear of being happy that I had to overcome. He never once asked me for a single dollar. In fact, he showered me with thoughtful gifts and insisted on paying for everything. A first edition copy of my favorite book, a beautiful orchid for my office. That's the art of the long con. They make you feel so indebted to their generosity, so overwhelmed by their kindness, that when they finally ask for something, it feels not like them taking from you, but like an opportunity for you to finally give back. The relationship felt solid, real, and full of a future I had stopped allowing myself to dream of. We were spending most of our nights together, either at my place or his supposed apartment downtown. We fell into a comfortable domestic rhythm. One evening, as we were cooking dinner in my kitchen, I finally told him. I told him about my savings, the small but substantial nest egg I had spent my entire adult life carefully building. It was my security, my independence, the proof that I could stand on my own 2 feet. It was the most private, most important thing in my financial world. He listened, then came over and wrapped his arms around me from behind, his chin resting on my shoulder. "That's incredible, Clara," he whispered, his voice full of what I mistook for pride. "It just proves what I've known all along. You're a fortress." He held me there for a long moment. "I feel like I can tell you anything," he said. "I've never felt this safe, this seen with anyone before." I leaned back into his embrace, my heart swelling with a happiness so profound it felt like it might burst. I felt completely and utterly safe. I did not feel the cool, analytical gaze of a predator who had just successfully located his prey's most vulnerable point. I did not understand that his feeling of safety was the feeling of a hunter who knows the trap is about to be sprung. He wove himself into the very fabric of my life with such skill that I barely felt the threads. He wasn't just my lover. He became my confidant, my handyman, my protector. He learned the specific creak of the third step on my porch and fixed it without my asking. He noticed the brand of tea I drank and began showing up with a fresh box before I ran out. He was filling every empty space, every silent corner of my life, with his thoughtful, capable presence. I didn't realize until it was too late that he was simply preparing the ground for his own harvest. His role as the knowledgeable, successful man who could handle the world became a central part of our dynamic. One afternoon, he was at my house, working on his laptop at the kitchen table. The screen was filled with complex charts, moving lines, and columns of numbers. He looked like a general in his command center, calm and in control. I asked him what he was looking at. He smiled, a warm, inviting smile, and beckoned me over. Have you ever listened to someone explain a complex world that you can't quite grasp? It's a form of magic. He didn't use jargon to exclude me. He used simple, elegant metaphors to invite me in. He showed me charts that moved like constellations and spoke of market trends as if he could predict the movement of the stars. "You see, Clara," he explained, pointing to a green upward trend, "this isn't just a number. This is a story. It's the story of a small company that had a great idea, and now thousands of people are believing in it. My job is to find those stories before anyone else does." He made it sound noble. He made it sound like he was a patron of dreams, a finder of hidden potential. How could I not believe he was a magician? It was after a few weeks of this comfortable, perfect domesticity that he began to subtly shift his language. It started with small things. When talking about the future, he stopped saying you and started saying we. He never said, "Give me your money." It was always our future. He started talking about our financial security, our retirement. He was so skilled, so seamless, that he made his plan for my savings feel like a beautiful shared dream we were building together, brick by brick. "You know, Clara," he said one evening as we sat on my porch watching the sunset, "you've worked so hard your whole life. You've built this incredible, secure foundation for yourself. I've worked hard to build the knowledge of how to make a foundation like that grow into a skyscraper." He took my hand. "With your savings and my expertise, We could build a future where you never have to worry about a single thing ever again. A future where you could retire early, travel, do whatever your heart desires. The idea was intoxicating. He wasn't just offering to invest my money, he was offering to invest in me, in us. He was offering me the one thing I had been secretly craving for a decade: a partner, a teammate. The exposition of my story was now complete. I was a woman who had been starved of partnership, of feeling cared for. And Julian had presented himself as the perfect provider, the perfect protector. The trust was absolute. The foundation for my betrayal was perfectly laid. The final fatal moment came a few days later. We were curled up on the sofa, a fire crackling in the hearth. The mood was intimate, safe, and full of a quiet domestic joy. He turned to me, his kind, intelligent eyes full of a sincere, manufactured gravity. "Clara," he said softly, his hand gently stroking my hair. "I've been thinking a lot about our future. About your future. And I have an idea. Something that could change everything for you. For us." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle in the quiet room. "It's a big step," he continued, "but I think you're ready to hear it. Let's have a special dinner tomorrow night. Just you and me, and we'll talk about the rest of our lives." He chose to cook for me at my house for our special dinner. It was a brilliant strategic move, transforming my own safe, familiar space into the stage for his final performance. The air was filled with the scent of garlic and rosemary, the soft sound of a jazz trio playing from his phone, and the almost unbearable weight of my own hopeful anticipation. He was the perfect host, the perfect partner. He poured the wine. He talked about our future, painting a picture of a life where my days were not filled with budget meetings and administrative burdens, but with art museums, with travel, with the simple, elegant peace of not having to worry. Then after dinner, as we sat on the sofa with a glass of wine, he laid out the fantasy on the coffee table between us. It was a glossy, professionally printed prospectus filled with impressive charts and diagrams. "Clara," he began, his voice a low, serious, and utterly convincing murmur. "An opportunity has come up. It's a private offshore investment in a green energy startup in Southeast Asia. It's a game changer. The returns are projected to be astronomical." He paused, letting the weight of the opportunity settle. "Normally," he continued, "the buy-in for this fund is $1 million. It's only for my wealthiest, most established clients. But I'm one of the fund managers. I pulled some strings. I called in a favor. I can get you in with a smaller stake." He was offering me a key to an exclusive world, a world I had only ever read about. But my lifetime of caution, of prudent saving and careful planning, was a deeply ingrained instinct. "Julian," I said, my voice hesitant, "this is a lot. It's moving so fast. We're talking about my entire life savings. Have you ever stood on a cliff's edge with someone you trust with all your heart, telling you that if you just take one more step, you will fly?" Every rational instinct in my body screamed danger. But his voice was so calm, so certain, and oh, how desperately I wanted to believe him. He saw the hesitation in my eyes, the fear, and like the master manipulator he was, he immediately pivoted from logic to emotion. He closed the glossy prospectus, dismissing the numbers as if they were unimportant. He moved closer and took both of my hands in his. "Clara, look at me," he said, his voice soft and full of a devastatingly sincere-sounding concern. "Forget the charts. Forget the money. This is not about that. This is about you." He held my gaze, his kind, intelligent eyes searching mine. "I see how hard you've worked your entire life. I see how tired you are, deep in your bones, of carrying the entire weight of the world on your own shoulders. You've been the strong one, the responsible one for everyone for so long. The masterstroke of his argument wasn't about the numbers on a page, it was about the exhaustion in my soul. He took my hand, looked me directly in the eye, and offered me the one thing I craved more than any financial return: a rest. For once in your life, he said, his voice a hypnotic whisper, let me be the one to take the lead. Let me be the one to worry about the future. Let me carry the weight for a while. You've earned it. Let me take care of you. He leaned in and kissed my forehead. Trust me, he said, and in that moment, the fortress of my caution, the lifetime of careful, self-reliant planning, crumbled into dust. He wasn't just asking for my money. He was asking for my trust and offering to lift the burden of my life from my shoulders. It was the most seductive offer I had ever received. I looked into his kind, honest eyes, and I gave him the only answer my heart would allow. Okay, I whispered. Yes. The morning after I said yes, the soft romantic haze was replaced by a quiet, unnerving efficiency. Julian arrived at my house with a leather-bound folder and a thermos of my favorite coffee. He was no longer just the charming suitor, he was the competent broker, ready to close the deal. He had the paperwork ready, a simple one-page investment agreement that looked official enough, along with the account numbers and SWIFT codes for the wire transfer. I was no longer a woman being wooed. I was an asset being liquidated. I'll come with you to the bank, he said, his voice a comforting balm on my frayed nerves. I'll wait in the car, of course. This is your moment, but I want to be there to support you. The drive to my bank was the longest 10 minutes of my life. A lifetime of cautious, responsible living was at war with the intoxicating promise of a future where I was not alone. Every rational instinct I had screamed at me to stop the car, to turn around, to run, but the memory of Julian's voice, his promise to take care of me, was a powerful sedative, hushing the frantic alarms in my head. He walked me to the door of the bank, gave my hand a reassuring squeeze, and smiled. I am so proud of you for taking this step for us, Clara, he said. Our future starts today. I walked into the cold marble hall of the bank, the transfer instructions clutched in my hand. I felt like a spy carrying a secret message, a traitor to my own well-being. I sat down with a personal banker, a kind, middle-aged woman named Susan, whom I had known for years. Clara, good to see you, she said warmly. What can we do for you today? My voice was a dry whisper. I need to make a wire transfer, I said, sliding the paper with Julian's instructions across the desk. Susan looked at it. Her professional, friendly expression tightened ever so slightly. She saw the amount. My entire life savings. She saw the destination. A holding company at a bank in Cyprus. This is a very large sum, Clara, she said, her voice now carefully neutral. And it's an international transfer. For security reasons, I have to ask, are you familiar with the recipient of these funds? Have you ever heard your own voice lie to someone who is trying to protect you? Susan, the woman who had helped me set up my first retirement account, was looking at me with genuine professional concern. She was my last line of defense, and I betrayed her. Yes, of course, I said, my voice a stranger's. It's a private investment for my future. Are you absolutely certain about this, Clara? She asked, her eyes searching mine. Once this is sent, it cannot be recalled. It's final. I thought of Julian waiting in the car, so proud of me. I thought of his promise to lift the weight of the world from my shoulders. I took a deep breath. I'm sure, I lied. I signed the forms, my signature feeling like a forgery. I watched on the screen as she executed the transfer. A few clicks of her mouse and a decade's worth of careful, painstaking saving was gone, sent hurtling through the digital ether to an island I couldn't find on a map. The moment it was done, A wave of pure, cold, nauseating terror washed over me. What have I done? The feeling was so overwhelming I had to grip the arms of the chair to steady myself. I stumbled out of the bank and into the bright sunlight, my heart pounding, my mouth dry. I saw Julian get out of the car, a look of concern on his face. I must have looked like a ghost. But then my phone buzzed. It was a message from him. It was a screenshot. It was a beautiful, professional-looking image of a trading portfolio. At the top, in a clean, modern font, was my name, Clara Reed, and below it, a balance. It was the exact amount I had just transferred, down to the last dollar, already deposited. The relief was so profound, so absolute, it was like coming up for air after being held underwater. It was proof. He was real. My trust was justified. I had no idea I was looking at a beautifully crafted forgery, an image as fake as the story of his failed tech startup, an illusion created in 5 minutes on a simple photo editing app. "You did it," he said, wrapping his arms around me as I stood trembling on the sidewalk. "It's all there, safe. Now, our work begins." I leaned into him, my terror replaced by a rush of adrenaline-fueled gratitude and love. I had passed the test. I had jumped off the cliff, and just as he had promised, I was flying. The days immediately following the transfer were the happiest of my life. The gnawing anxiety I had felt was replaced by a giddy, intoxicating sense of relief and excitement. Julian was more attentive and loving than ever. He treated me like a brilliant partner, a savvy investor. He sent me a small, plausible market update each morning and a screenshot each evening showing our balance growing by a few $100s. I felt like the smartest, luckiest woman in the world. I was a cherished partner, a financial visionary. It was all a perfect, beautiful, and utterly catastrophic lie. That weekend, he took me for a drive along the coast. We talked about the future, not in vague, romantic terms, but with concrete plans. A trip to Tuscany in the spring. He even suggested we start casually looking at houses together, just to get a feel for what we want our home to look like. He was building a future so detailed and so real that it seemed impossible for it not to be true. Have you ever been so happy that you actively refused to see the red flags? He was more charming than ever, our future more certain. If a small, quiet voice in the back of my mind whispered that this was all happening too fast, that it was all too good to be true, I told that voice to be quiet. I didn't want the truth. I wanted the dream he was selling me. The genius of his scam wasn't in the single act of taking the money. It was in the week that followed. He built my confidence so high, made me feel so secure, so much a part of a winning team, that when the silence finally came, I wouldn't be able to believe it was real. He wasn't just stealing my money. He was methodically dismantling my intuition. The first missed call came on a Tuesday night, exactly a week after the transfer. Our nightly call had become a comforting ritual, and when he didn't call at our usual time, a small knot of anxiety began to form in my stomach. I called him, but it went straight to voicemail. I texted. No reply. I tried to sleep, but I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, my mind a whirlwind of worry. He finally called me the next morning, his voice sounding exhausted but exhilarated. "Clara, darling, I am so sorry," he said. "It was a complete madhouse." A sudden market dip in Asia. I was on a series of emergency conference calls with my partners in Hong Kong until 4 a.m. It was brutal. But, he added, his voice dropping with excitement, I saw an opportunity. I was able to leverage our position and actually turn the crisis into a significant gain for us. I'll send you the updated statement. The excuse was so perfect. It explained his absence, reinforced his status as a brilliant broker, and even promised me more profit. My relief was so total that it washed away any suspicion. But then the pattern began. The nightly calls were replaced with texts. The texts became less frequent, often just a quick, "Crazy day, talk tomorrow, darling." The excuses were always plausible, always related to some complex international deal that was consuming all his time. He was no longer the attentive partner. He was the busy, important broker, and I was expected to understand. After 2 full days of complete silence, no calls, no texts, not even a market update, the anxiety had grown into a full-blown sickening panic. The dream was beginning to fray at the edges, and the terrifying reality of what I had done was starting to peek through. I told myself I was being foolish, that he was just busy, as he'd said. But I couldn't shake the cold dread coiling in my stomach. On Friday afternoon, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to see him. I needed the reassurance of his physical presence, his warm smile. I decided to surprise him. I would go to his apartment downtown, the one we'd spent a few nights at, and I would bring a bottle of his favorite wine. It would be a romantic gesture. It would make everything okay. I drove downtown, my hands slick with nervous sweat on the steering wheel. I walked into the lobby of his sleek, modern apartment building. It was the same lobby we had walked through a dozen times. The same concierge, a polite young man named Ben, was at the desk. "Good afternoon, Ben," I said, my voice brighter than I felt. "I'm just heading up to see Julian in 12B. The concierge looked up from his computer, a pleasant, professional smile on his face. Then his smile faltered. Replaced by a look of polite confusion, he consulted his screen. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he said, his brow furrowed, "but who are you here to see?" "Julian," I repeated, my own smile beginning to feel stiff. "Julian Croft." Apartment 12B. He looked at his screen again, then back at me. "My apologies," he said, his voice still polite, but now with a note of finality. "But we've never had a resident by that name in this building." Apartment 12B is occupied by a Mrs. Henderson. She's lived here for 5 years. The concierge's words were polite, professional, and they were the sound of a trap door opening directly beneath my feet. They didn't compute at first. My mind, so thoroughly conditioned to believe in Julian's reality, simply refused to accept them. "No," I said, a faint, foolish laugh escaping my lips. "No, that can't be right. I've been here with him, to apartment 12B. He has a key." The young man's face softened with what I now recognized as pity. It was a look I would come to know well. "Ma'am," he said gently, "I've been working this desk for 3 years. I know every resident in this building." Mrs. Henderson in 12B is an elderly woman who lives with her 2 cats. There has never been a man named Julian Croft living here. In the space of 30 seconds, the man I loved had been downgraded from a busy boyfriend to a potential mistake, and now to a complete and utter phantom. I stumbled backward from the desk, a wave of dizziness washing over me. I muttered a thank you and walked on unsteady legs out of the cool marble lobby and into the harsh afternoon sun. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely unlock my phone. My first desperate instinct was to hear his voice, to have him laugh and explain this absurd, terrifying misunderstanding. I called his number. It did not ring. There was no voicemail. There was only a cold, robotic, and utterly final message from the phone company. "The number you have dialed has been disconnected and is no longer in service." Have you ever been ghosted by an actual ghost? I wasn't just being ignored or sent to voicemail. The digital person I had fallen in love with, the man whose voice had become the comforting soundtrack to my daily life, had been methodically, surgically deleted from existence. The second blow. My last pathetic hope was Tinder, the place where this dream, this nightmare had begun. I opened the app, my thumb swiping frantically through my messages, looking for his face, for our conversation history. It was gone. All of it. The profile with the kind, intelligent eyes, our first witty exchanges, the plans we had made, all of it had vanished as if it had never existed. I hadn't just been unmatched. I had been erased. They say that when you suffer a great and sudden shock, your body takes over because your mind simply cannot cope. I don't remember walking away from the front of the building, but I remember the feeling of cold, hard stone beneath my hands. I was sitting on the wide granite steps leading up to the lobby. My handbag dropped at my feet. The noise of the city, the traffic, the people walking past, it all receded into a distant, meaningless hum. The only sound I could hear was the frantic, panicked drumming of my own heart against my ribs, a trapped bird trying to break free from the cage of my own breathtaking stupidity. The coldness came next. It started in my fingertips and spread through my entire body, a deep, internal winter. It was the coldness of absolute truth. The apartment, the phone number, the dating profile, all of it, a lie. A carefully constructed stage set for a play in which I was the only unwitting actor. And the money. My God, the money. My life savings. The 10 years of careful planning, of skipped vacations and modest living, the fortress I had so proudly built to protect my future, I had not just given him the key. I had walked him into the vault and helped him carry it all away. All of it. The trust, the shared dreams, the hope for a new life, the feeling of being seen and cared for, it all dissolved in that single horrifying moment on those steps. It was all a lie. He was a lie. And I, Clara Reed, a competent, intelligent, 54-year-old woman, was the biggest fool in the entire lonely world. I don't know how long I sat on those cold granite steps. It could have been 10 minutes or an hour. The world moved on around me. Cars honked, people laughed. The sun continued its slow, indifferent arc across the sky. Eventually, a security guard gently touched my shoulder and asked if I was all right. The simple act of human concern was enough to break the spell. I stood up on shaky legs, picked up my handbag, and began the long, zombie-like walk back to my car. The drive home was a journey through the wreckage of my own mind. Every street corner, every landmark was now a memory of a lie he had told me. There was a little Italian restaurant where he first held my hand across the table. There was the park where we had walked, where he told me the fabricated story of his past betrayal. They were no longer my places. They were crime scenes, each one tainted by the ghost of a man who never existed. When I got home, the silence that I had once found so lonely now felt accusatory. The kitchen where he had cooked for me, the sofa where he had held me, the whole house was a monument to my own foolishness. The shock that had frozen me on the steps was beginning to thaw, replaced by a frantic, desperate need to do something, to report it, to make it real to someone other than myself. My first and only logical thought was the police. The local precinct was a tired, beige building that smelled of stale coffee and bureaucracy. I sat on a hard plastic chair waiting, clutching my handbag like a life raft. When my turn finally came, I sat down opposite a tired, overweight desk sergeant who looked like he had heard every sad story in the world twice. Have you ever tried to explain a broken heart to a man with a clipboard? I laid out the details of my ruin, my voice shaking, the story sounding more pathetic and more naive with every word I spoke. I met a man online. His name was Julian Croft. He was a broker. I transferred him my life savings. Now he's gone. The officer listened with a look of practiced, weary sympathy. He took my statement, his pen moving in a slow, methodical crawl. He asked for the bank details, the account numbers, the website of the fake investment firm. I gave him everything I had. When I was finished, he sighed, the sound of a man delivering a prognosis he had delivered 1,000 times before. "Ma'am," he said, not unkindly, "I'm going to be honest with you. These romance scammers, these Tinder swindlers, they're ghosts. The name you knew is fake. The photos were likely stolen from someone else's social media. The money was wired to Cyprus, and I can guarantee you that within minutes, it was bounced to a dozen other accounts in a dozen other countries. It's gone. He handed me a pamphlet with the title, Surviving Internet Fraud, and a slip of paper with a case number on it. "We've filed the report," he said, "but the chances of us ever finding this person or recovering a single penny of your money are almost zero. I'm very sorry." I walked out of that police station and into the fading afternoon light, the useless case number clutched in my hand. The last desperate shred of hope that some official, powerful entity could fix my mistake was gone. The police officer had given me a conclusion. He didn't know that what felt like the end of my story was actually the beginning of a much, much different one. I returned to my empty, silent house, and that's when the dam finally broke. The cold, numbing shock gave way, and a great, racking sob tore through me. I collapsed onto the floor in my hallway and wept. I wept for the money, for the 10 years of disciplined, lonely work it represented. I wept for the future I had lost, the dream of a partnership, of a life of ease and companionship. But mostly, I wept for the woman I had been. The naive, hopeful, trusting woman who had so desperately wanted to believe that she had finally gotten lucky. I mourned her foolish open heart. I cried until there were no tears left, until I was just a hollow, aching shell on the floor. And then, as the last of the grief subsided, something new and unfamiliar began to smolder in the pit of my stomach. It was a cold, hard, and deeply unfamiliar feeling. It was rage. The tears eventually ran dry, leaving behind the salty, raw tracks of my grief. I lay on the floor of my hallway for a long time, hollowed out, empty. But the problem with a vacuum is that nature abhors it. And the empty space that my sorrow had occupied was now being filled with a new and unfamiliar element. It was a slow, rising heat, a foundation of pure, cold, diamond-hard rage. He had thought I was a naive, emotional woman, easily blinded by charm and sweet words. He was about to find out what a high school administrator with a broken heart, a lifetime of organizational skills, and a burning thirst for justice could do with a laptop and a search engine. I pushed myself up from the floor. The woman who had wept for her own foolishness was gone. In her place was someone new, someone I had never met before. She was focused, she was methodical, and she was furious. I went to my office, the place where I managed school budgets and organized academic schedules, and sat down at my laptop. This machine, the portal through which his lies had entered my life, was now going to be my weapon. I opened a new file, a digital investigation board. The police had told me he was a ghost, but ghosts, I knew, always leave traces. A faint digital footprint, a forgotten name in an old message, a tiny flaw in a perfect forgery. He was a ghost, yes, and I had just decided to become a ghost hunter. I began with our first conversations. I opened every email, every text, every message from the dating app that I had screenshotted. I was no longer reading our love story. I was dissecting a crime scene. Every sweet word had become potential evidence. Every promise was now a clue to his methodology. I compiled a list. He had mentioned just once a colleague named David who supposedly handled his Asian market accounts. I wrote the name down. David. It was a common name, almost useless, but it was a start. Next, I opened the glossy, fake investment prospectus he had sent me as a PDF. I had printed it out to read it, like a fool. Now, I examined the digital file itself. I am not a computer expert, but I am a meticulous researcher. A quick search online taught me how to look at a file's metadata. There, buried in the code, was the name of the software used to create it. A simple, cheap, consumer-grade desktop publishing program. Not the expensive professional software a real multi-million-dollar fund would use. It was another small crack in his facade. Then I moved to the screenshots he had sent, the ones showing my growing balance. I zoomed in on the images, magnifying them until the pixels were blurry, and then I saw it. In the bottom right corner, so faint it was almost invisible, was a tiny ghostly watermark. It was the logo of a free online photo editing service. He hadn't used a real trading platform. He had just typed numbers onto a template and sent me a picture. It was a lazy, arrogant mistake, and it was a clue. My search for the name of that watermarked software led me down a rabbit hole. I found myself on websites I never knew existed, forums, message boards, and blogs dedicated to survivors of romance scams. I read story after story from women all over the world. Their stories were all different, yet chillingly, terrifyingly the same. The charming, successful man, the whirlwind romance, the exclusive investment opportunity, the sudden, silent disappearance. I was not a unique, tragic fool. I was just the latest victim in a global industry of broken hearts and stolen savings. For hours, I read. And as I read, my personal burning rage began to transform into a cold, clear sense of purpose. The police couldn't help me. The banks couldn't help me. But these women, this invisible global army of survivors, they were helping each other. They were sharing clues, comparing photos, piecing together the identities of these phantoms. I took a deep breath. My investigation was over. It was time to join the hunt. I began to write a new post on the primary forum. I did not write as a victim looking for sympathy. I wrote as an investigator, laying out the facts of my case. Subject, broker named Julian Croft, operating in Chicago, uses green energy startup in Cyprus. Body. I am the latest victim of a man calling himself Julian Croft. I have details of his methodology, the name of a potential associate, David, and I have discovered the watermark of the specific photo editing software he uses for his fraudulent portfolio screenshots. I am looking for anyone else who has encountered this man or this methodology. I attached the watermarked screenshot, a clean copy with my personal information removed. I stared at the post for a long moment. It was an act of profound vulnerability, of admitting my shame to a world of strangers, but it was also an act of defiance. I was no longer hiding. My finger, steady and firm, moved to the mouse. I clicked post. I had sent my story out into the digital darkness like a message in a bottle cast into the vast, anonymous ocean of the internet. I didn't know if it would wash up on a deserted island or find its way to a friendly shore. I just knew that sitting in silence was no longer an option. I had been a victim for long enough. I sat there for an hour, watching the screen, my heart pounding with a strange mixture of fear and hope. I refreshed the page. The first few responses were what I expected. Messages of sympathy and support from other women who had their own similar scars. I am so sorry this happened to you. Stay strong, sister. He is a monster. Each message was a small, comforting light, a reminder that I was not, in fact, the only fool in the world. I was part of a sad, unwilling, but powerful sisterhood. And then a new notification appeared. It was not a public comment. It was a private message. The username was Anya_Berlin. My breath caught in my throat. I clicked it open. The message was written in slightly broken but urgent English. I am reading your post on the forum, it began. My God, it is the same man, the same story. For me, in Germany, his name was Lars. He was a commodities trader specializing in rare earth minerals. But the method, the perfect dates, the story of a past betrayal, the exclusive investment, the fake screenshots, it is exactly the same. The colleague he mentioned to you, was his name David? What is the sound of a ghost getting a name? It is the quiet chime of a private message notification from a stranger, a woman who lives 5,000 miles away but has been sleeping in the very same nightmare as you. It is the sound of two victims becoming a team. My fingers flew across the keyboard. Yes, I wrote back. His name was David. Anya, I have photos of him, the ones he used on his profile here. Her reply came back in seconds. Please send them to me. I have them too. We must see if they are the same man. We moved the conversation to a secure encrypted messaging app. I sent her the photos of Julian, the kind, intelligent eyes, the confident smile. Her response was a single chilling word, Lars. She sent me her photos. It was him. The same man, the same smile, just wearing a different suit in a photo taken in front of the Brandenburg Gate. For the next several hours, we were a frantic two-woman intelligence agency, separated by an ocean but united by a shared betrayal. We compared every detail of our stories, every lie he had told, every promise he had made. She had a different name for him, a different city, a different set of lies, but she also had a different set of clues. We were two women who had been looking at two different, isolated corners of the same dark room. And now, by combining our knowledge, we were about to turn on the lights. His green energy startup in Cyprus had been a rare earth mineral mine in Bolivia for her. The screenshots he had sent her had the same faint watermark as mine. The story of his past betrayal was almost identical. Only the name of the business partner who wronged him was different. We were building a profile, a methodology. This wasn't just a man, it was an operation. The police here told me the same thing, she typed, her words appearing on my screen, that he is a ghost. That the money is gone. Mine too, I replied. But a ghost cannot be in two places at once, she wrote. He told me, just once, about a specific place. A small detail I almost forgot. He said he had a meeting with a difficult client and had to stay at his favorite hotel in London, a place he said was quiet and discreet. He said it was called the Stafford. My heart began to beat faster. It was a concrete detail, a real place, a name. What can we do with that? I typed. I do not know, she replied. But he is not just your ghost or my ghost anymore, Clara. He is our ghost. And two people can hunt better than one. I looked at the name she had given me, the Stafford Hotel, London. It was a tiny, fragile thread. But it was the first real thread I had held in weeks. The hunt was no longer a desperate, lonely search. It was a collaboration, an alliance. And it had just begun. The name of the hotel sat on my screen, a single, solid fact in a world that had become a hall of mirrors. The Stafford Hotel, London. It was a lead, but what was it a lead to? We couldn't just call and ask if a man named Julian or Lars was a guest. He was a professional liar. He was likely using a dozen different names. For a moment, I felt a familiar wave of hopelessness. We were two ordinary women, armed with nothing but our pain and a few digital breadcrumbs. He was a ghost. But then Anya typed a message that sent a jolt of cold, clear purpose through me. He used a story to steal from us, Clara. So, we will use a story to find him. It was a beautiful, symmetrical piece of justice. We were about to become the con artists, and he was the mark. For the next hour, we worked together, crafting our strategy. Anya, being in a European time zone and having a slight, unplaceable accent when she spoke English, would make the call. She would not be a heartbroken victim. She would be the polished, efficient personal assistant to a wealthy German industrialist, a Mr. Schmidt. We rehearsed the script. I played the part of the concierge, trying to poke holes in her story. By the time we were done, she was ready. She initiated the call, and I listened in on a muted line from my quiet house in Chicago. Have you ever held your breath for a stranger 5,000 miles away? I sat in my study, the sun setting outside my window, listening to the faint crackle of an international phone line. A woman in Berlin was pretending to be someone she wasn't, all to hunt down the man who had broken both our hearts and stolen both our futures. In that moment, the world felt very small, and the stakes felt impossibly high. A crisp British voice answered, "The Stafford Hotel, good afternoon. How may I help you?" Anya's voice when she spoke was a marvel. It was cool, professional, and held just the right note of entitled impatience. "Good afternoon," she said. "I am calling on behalf of Mr. Schmidt. He is considering a long-term residence at your hotel for the autumn season and has asked me to make some preliminary inquiries." "Of course, madam. We would be delighted to assist," the concierge replied. "Mr. Schmidt was referred by a former guest," Anya continued smoothly. "An American gentleman, I believe, a commodities trader. He spoke so highly of your discretion and your impeccable service. He stays with you quite often on his business in London. A very charming man, but his name was, let me see." She made a sound of someone consulting their notes. "Lars, I believe. Or perhaps he used the name Julian Croft on occasion. He mentioned you were his home away from home." There was a pause. It was only a second, but it felt like an eternity. The concierge was a professional, trained in the fine art of polite, impenetrable discretion. He would never give out a guest's name, but we weren't asking for a name. We were asking for a confirmation. And in his perfectly polished, carefully worded, and utterly professional reply, he told us everything we needed to know. "I do apologize, madam," he said, his voice now a shade more formal, a shade more guarded. "But due to our strict guest privacy policy, I am unable to confirm or deny the names or state histories of any of our patrons." He hadn't said, "I've never heard of him." He hadn't said, "There is no one by that name in our records." He had invoked the privacy policy, and you only invoke a privacy policy when there is information that needs to be protected. Anya pressed just a little, a perfect final touch. "Of course, I understand completely. Discretion is precisely what Mr. Schmidt requires. I will let him know that you are as professional as his associate claimed." "Thank you, madam," the concierge said, the relief in his voice almost palpable. "Please let us know if we can be of any further assistance." Anya hung up. For a moment we were both silent on our muted line, then she spoke, her voice no longer that of a cool assistant, but of a triumphant huntress. "He's there," she whispered. "That's his base. He's a regular." A surge of adrenaline, of pure, electrifying hope, shot through me. The ghost was no longer a phantom drifting through the ether of the internet. He was a man. A man with a favorite hotel, with patterns, with habits. A man with a physical footprint in the real world. "He's real," Anya said, her voice full of a dark wonder. "He's findable." I looked at the notes I had been taking. The name of the hotel circled 3 times. "Good," I replied, a cold, unfamiliar smile touching my own lips. "Because now we know where to start digging." We had confirmed the ghost's hunting ground. Now it was time to give the ghost a face and, if we were lucky, a name. We knew we couldn't proceed alone. We were 2 women, an ocean apart, with a single unconfirmed lead. It was time to call in the army. Our army was the quiet, invisible sisterhood of the Scam Survivor Forum. We went back to my original post, the one that had connected us, and we drafted an update. It was a call to arms. Update. We have a credible lead. The man using the aliases Julian Croft, USA, and Lars Schmidt, Germany, appears to use the Stafford Hotel in London as a frequent base of operations. We are now sharing his photos publicly. We are asking for help from anyone, particularly in the London area, who might recognize this man. We are also looking for any other women who may have encountered him anywhere in the world. Let's compare notes. Let's find out who he really is. Have you ever felt the terrifying power of sending a person's face out into the world with the simple question, does anyone know this man? It was an act of profound vulnerability, a public admission of our own victimization, but it was also an act of incredible strength. We were turning his own image, the charming, handsome face he had used to deceive us, into the very tool of his unmasking. We hit post. The response was a firestorm. We had sent a single flare of hope into the vast darkness of the internet. We were about to discover that the army of the scorned is larger, faster, and more powerful than any one con man could ever imagine. Within hours, the post was flooded with comments and private messages from all over the world. A woman from Toronto, he called himself Daniel. He was an art dealer. Same face, same story of a past betrayal. A woman from Dubai. That's Alex. He told me he was in oil and gas. A message from a woman in Sydney, another from Singapore. The names, the professions, the investment schemes were all different. A customized web of lies for each victim. But the face was always the same. And the methodology, the love bombing, the fake screenshots, the slow fade, was identical. We were not just two victims anymore. We were part of a global community of women he had wounded. We were a chorus of voices rising against him. But the true breakthrough came 24 hours later. It was a private message, the subject line simply reading, "I know him." My heart stopped. Anya and I were on a video call at the time, and we both read it simultaneously. The message was from a young woman whose username was LondonGirl88. "Hello," the message read. "I don't know if this will help, but I think I know who you are looking for. I was a concierge at the Stafford until about 6 months ago. I recognized this man's face instantly. He was one of our long-term residents, staying for months at a time. He was always known as a very charming, very generous, but also very private guest. We all knew him by one name. It's not Julian or Lars or any of the others you mentioned." I held my breath, my eyes glued to the screen as Anya read the next line aloud. "He paid for everything with an American Express Centurion card. A black card." The name on the card, and the name we all knew him by, was Richard Sterling. Richard Sterling. The name landed with the force of a physical blow. It sounded real. It sounded expensive. It sounded like the kind of name a man like him would actually have. It was the key. The ghost now had a name. The phantom had a form. With a real name, we could go back to the police. A real name could be traced through flight manifests, bank records, corporate registries. A real name was attached to a passport, a social security number, a life. The hunt for the phantom was over. The hunt for Richard Sterling was about to begin. I looked at Anya's face on my screen, her eyes wide with the same dawning, terrible triumph that I felt in my own chest. The climax was over. The puzzle was solved. She gave me a small, determined nod. "We got him," she said, "a name. It is such a simple, fundamental thing. But for Anya and me, the name Richard Sterling was a key, a weapon, and a compass. It was the first piece of solid ground we could stand on after months of drifting in a phantom sea of his lies. The ghost now had a body, and we knew it was only a matter of time before the world would find it. The hours after the discovery of his name were a blur of coordinated, adrenaline-fueled work. We spent the night building a dossier. It was a masterpiece of crowdsourced justice. We compiled every piece of our digital archaeology into a single, comprehensive file. At the top was his handsome, smiling face, now captioned with his real name and a list of his known aliases. Julian, Lars, Daniel, Alex, Martin. Below that, we listed his confirmed base of operations, the Stafford Hotel London. We detailed his consistent methodology, the specific grooming techniques, The fabricated stories of past betrayals, the fake investment prospectuses for everything from green energy to rare earth minerals, and the signature use of the photo editing software to create fraudulent portfolio statements. Finally, with their permission, we added the names and contact information of 5 other women from the forum, from Toronto to Dubai to Sydney, who had confirmed he was the same man who had defrauded them. We were no longer 2 victims. We were the founders of an international task force. The next morning, I printed out 2 copies of our dossier. They made a thick, satisfying stack of paper, heavy with facts. Then, I did something I had sworn I would never do. I drove back to the same police precinct where I had been so politely and thoroughly dismissed. Have you ever had the deep satisfaction of returning to a place of your own humiliation, not with a complaint, but with a solution? The same tired desk sergeant was on duty. He looked up at me, a flicker of vague recognition and pity in his eyes. "I remember you," he said. "The internet fraud case." "Ma'am, I told you, there's really nothing we can—" "I'm not here to ask for help," I interrupted, my voice calm and firm. "I'm here to provide it." I placed the thick, neatly bound dossier on the counter in front of him. "His name is Richard Sterling," I said. The officer looked at the cover page, at the photo, at the list of aliases. He looked back at me. The bored, jaded look in his eyes was slowly replaced by something I hadn't seen there before. Genuine professional interest. He opened the file and began to read. He read the first page, then the second. He saw Anya's story from Berlin, the story from the woman in Toronto. He saw the name of the hotel in London. He saw the pattern. He was silent for a long time, the only sound the turning of the pages. "My God," he whispered, mostly to himself, "this isn't a romance scam. This is a multi-million-dollar international fraud operation." The ghost was about to become a federal case. He looked up at me, all traces of his earlier weariness gone, replaced by the sharp, focused energy of a real cop who has just been handed a real case. "Ma'am," he said, his voice now full of a newfound respect, "you need to come with me. You need to speak with Detective Miller in the Cybercrimes Division, immediately." As he led me through a secure door into the detective's bullpen, I felt a profound sense of a circle closing. The first time I had come here, I had been a victim, reporting a crime. This time, I was returning as the lead investigator, delivering the criminal. While I was being led to a detective's desk, Anya, 5,000 miles away, was doing the exact same thing, presenting an identical dossier to the Kriminalpolizei in Berlin. We were launching a coordinated, 2-pronged international legal assault. I left the police station an hour later. The first time, I had left with a useless case number and a feeling of utter hopelessness. This time, I left with the personal cell phone number of a lead detective who had shaken my hand and called my work extraordinary. The case was now in the hands of the professionals of the FBI and Interpol, but they were all working off the blueprint that 2 heartbroken, determined, and quietly furious women had drawn for them. The resolution was now in motion. And for Richard Sterling, wherever in the world he was, the time of easy lies and quiet escapes was officially over. For months he had been the hunter, and we had been his scattered, isolated prey. Now, the roles were reversed. But the new hunters were not 2 heartbroken women on laptops. They were the combined police forces of 2 continents, armed with the dossier we had built. And Richard Sterling had no idea they were coming for him. The weeks that followed were a masterclass in the slow, methodical, and terrifying power of a real investigation. Detective Miller would call me periodically with brief professional updates. A name, he explained, was a key that unlocked everything. With Richard Sterling, the FBI was able to get a federal warrant for his financial records. The walls of his anonymity, which had seemed so impenetrable, crumbled overnight. What does a global manhunt look like in the 21st century? It's not a dramatic car chase, it's the quiet, systematic closing of digital doors. It is the freezing of a secret bank account in Switzerland, the flagging of a passport in London, and the patient waiting of a team of federal agents at a gate at JFK. They discovered he was an American citizen who had been living abroad for years, a ghost in the system with no fixed address, only a series of luxury hotels and private mailboxes. They traced the millions he had stolen from me, from Anja, and from dozens of other women through a dizzying web of offshore accounts designed to launder the money and make it untraceable. But a real name is a powerful thing. It leaves a digital trail that even the cleverest ghost cannot entirely erase. Meanwhile, the forum, which had once been a quiet, sad place of shared grief, had transformed into a bustling command center. Our story, the news of a real name and a real investigation, had gone viral within the community. More women came forward, their stories pouring in from every corner of the globe. A flight attendant from Australia, a widowed professor from Canada, a young artist from Italy. The list of his aliases grew. The total amount he had stolen climbed into the tens of millions. We were no longer just victims. We were a global network of witnesses feeding information to Detective Miller in Chicago and to Anya's police contacts in Berlin. We were building a digital prison of memories and evidence around the man who had thought we were all alone. The end came on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after my visit to the police station. I was in my kitchen, watering the orchid Julian had once given me. I had kept it, a small defiant act of finding beauty in the wreckage. My phone rang. It was Detective Miller. "I have some news, Ms." "Read," he said, his voice calm and professional. "We got him." Richard Sterling was taken into custody by federal agents at JFK Airport in New York less than an hour ago. He had just stepped off a flight from London. I sank into a chair, the small watering can still in my hand. He was caught. The ghost was in a cage. "He was on his phone when they approached him," the detective continued, "logged into a dating app. It appears he was already grooming his next victim in New York. You and your friends. You may have saved her." After I hung up, I was silent for a long moment. Then, I opened my laptop and went to the forum. I started a new thread. The title was simple. Subject, "We got him." The body of the post was even simpler. Richard Sterling, aka Julian, Lars, Daniel, Alex, etc., was arrested by the FBI at JFK Airport this morning. It's over. I hit post. And I watched as the digital world exploded with a chorus of triumphant, grateful, and tearful joy. Messages poured in from Berlin, from Toronto, from Sydney, from women I had never met but whose stories I now knew by heart. They were messages of thanks, of relief, of a justice they had never thought possible. The hunt was over. The man who had made us all feel so utterly alone had been brought down by the very community he had unknowingly created. We were a sisterhood of the scorned, and we had just won our war. A year has passed since the man who called himself Julian Croft, Lars Schmidt, and a dozen other names was sent to federal prison. The trial was a quiet, procedural affair. The evidence, a mountain of digital data, and the powerful, consistent testimony from a dozen women across the globe was so overwhelming that his expensive lawyers could do nothing but plead for mercy. The judge, a woman with a reputation for being tough on financial predators, was not in a merciful mood. He was sentenced to 25 years. The police recovered almost none of my money, just as the first officer had predicted. It had been expertly laundered, scattered to the digital winds. And yet, sitting here today in my small, quiet house, I have never felt richer. He tried to steal my future, but instead he gave me a purpose. What happens to a victim when the monster is finally caged? Does the fear go away? Not completely. It becomes a quiet, manageable scar, a reminder of a battle fought and won, but the silence it leaves behind is not empty. In that silence, a new voice begins to speak, your own. And you discover it is stronger than you ever imagined. I am still a high school administrator. I still manage budgets and schedules, and I still find a quiet satisfaction in that order. But my real work begins after the school bell rings. The forum, the place where I first found Anya, has become my calling. I am one of its senior moderators now. My friend Anya, from her home in Berlin, is the other. We are a team, the two women who first connected the dots. My nights are no longer spent swiping through the empty promises of dating apps. They are spent reading the stories of new women who arrive on our forum, their hearts broken, their bank accounts empty, their faith in humanity shattered. I read their stories, and in their pain, I see my own. I don't offer them pity. I offer them a blueprint. I share my story, and I tell them about the power of a single, well-documented clue. I teach them how to look at metadata, how to spot a watermark on a screenshot, how to cross-reference a name or a location. I help them transform their grief into a cold, clear-eyed investigation. I help them turn from victims into huntresses. He thought he was a ghost, untraceable and all-powerful. But he forgot one simple fundamental truth. Every woman he wronged was a storyteller. And when our stories, our clues, and our voices finally came together, they created a light so bright there was nowhere left for a ghost to hide. The orchid he gave me still sits on my desk. For a long time I couldn't look at it. It felt tainted, a symbol of his deception. But one day, I realized he didn't create the orchid, he only used it. Its beauty was its own. I have kept it, a small defiant reminder that you can find and nurture beauty even in the wreckage of a painful past. I am no longer a victim. I am not even a huntress anymore. The hunt is over. I am simply a keeper of the light, a tender of a digital garden where a global sisterhood of survivors helps each other to heal and to fight. I may never get my money back, but I have reclaimed something far more valuable. Myself. The naive woman who fell for a phantom is gone. In her place is a woman who knows her own worth, a woman who knows the difference between a beautiful lie and a difficult truth. And that, I have learned, is the greatest return on any investment you could ever make.